the 10th, 1947. And from Buckingham Palace came the announcement that made London the centre of interest and congratulation from every corner of the world. Through those glorious summer days, the whole capital reflected the nationwide joy at the engagement of Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth to Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten, R.N. Each familiar landmark seemed the brighter with news of the betrothal of Britain's future queen. A joyful proclamation echoed like a song in the hearts of our people. The first portrait. At the age of 2. An early public appearance as a bridesmaid. A favorite pastime, riding in Windsor Great Park. At an exhibition held in her old home, 145 Piccadilly, the princess was accompanied by her sister, who shared with her so many happy occasions. The first broadcast. Again with Princess Margaret at the Windsor Horse Show. As soon as her age permitted, the princess, at her own request, joined the ATS. A valuable time of training, thoroughly enjoyed by the princess in khaki, who was later to accompany her father at the first post-war trooping of the colour. Born in 1921, Lieutenant Mountbatten had the same quiet and simple upbringing as did the princess herself. The young Prince Philip, as he then was, came to Britain at an early age, and thereafter his home has been in these islands. His schools, first in Surrey, later in Scotland, and finally at the Royal Naval College, Dartmouth, were to form the background of his chosen career. Following his family's fine naval tradition, Lieutenant Mountbatten served with distinction during the war. Aboard HMS Valiant, he fought in the Battle of Cape Matapan. In peacetime, he was appointed an instructor at the shore training establishment, Corsham.
day of the wedding and immense crowds. Thousands had assembled overnight, others had arrived at dawn, all eagerly waiting to see and to cheer the royal processions on this day of their own princess's marriage. As must inevitably happen when such numbers collect and so much emotional excitement prevails, avoiding accidents becomes a primary consideration. Now the people had not much longer to wait. And at Kensington Palace, His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, with the Marquis of Milford Haven, his best man, checked the time for the start of his drive. A few moments too early, and then, lucky omen, a sweep stands by just before the bridegroom enters his car. The cheers of the people all along the route were sure evidence of his popularity as he drove swiftly towards Poets' Corner at the Abbey.
Crowds assembled near the palace thrilled again to a half-forgotten but once familiar spectacle, the troops of the household cavalry in all the glory of full dress. Moving up to their stations before the palace gates, troopers of the Life Guards and the Royal Horse Guards await the coming of the first royal procession. And here, in the leading coach, comes Her Majesty the Queen and the chief bridesmaid, Princess Margaret.
Captain's escort of household cavalry wearing full dress uniform were in attendance on the Queen and Princess Margaret, driving to the Abbey in the glass coach.
Into Parliament Square, and the Queen's procession arrives at the great west door of the Abbey. Back at Buckingham Palace, a great cheer from the expectant crowds heralded the long-awaited appearance of the second procession. And here, in the Irish state coach, comes His Majesty the King, and with him, Her Royal Highness the Bride. Amidst the cheering, waving crowds, the royal coach, with its sovereign's escort, makes its way along the route.
The greyness of this November day, matching in some respects the weary aftermath of war, these were neither seen nor felt, for this was a day of national rejoicing, a day indeed which had caught the imagination of men and women all over the world. And as the king and his daughter drove past, they received in overflowing measure the true and enduring affection of the people of Britain.
And here's the Irish coach coming up to the west door now, and I'll just hand you over to the sounds of the crowd that acclaim the bride as the anthem is played. Waiting for the anthem to finish. The doors are open and the crowd yells with excitement and with love as it sees the footman in the open doorway standing on this side of the princess and gets a glimpse of her not through the small windows of the coach, but in full view. We wait now, and as the crowd cheers and cheers, the king in the uniform of Admiral of the Fleet is standing there, coming forward to help his daughter to alight carefully, and now she steps down. Listen. And with that great cheer to warm her heart and to comfort her as she goes into her wedding, she paused for a moment and looked at the Abbey, and perhaps she was a little nervous in her heart. And as she goes out of our sight now on her father's arm, we go from this grey day outside into the warmth and the colour of the Abbey.
And inside the Abbey, this is our moment. We look towards the great west door. There the Dean of Westminster standing in the full splendour of his cope with a cloth of gold. Behind him the choir boys with their candles alight. At each grey pillar stands a yeoman of the guard in a vivid splash of scarlet. The bridesmaids have moved out to greet the bride, and we wait as the organ preludes for the signal that the trumpet shall sound and the bridal procession will begin. Wedding march peals out gaily through the Abbey. The procession of the bride and bridegrooms moves now down through the 2,000 guests who are standing here, bowing as the procession passes towards the great west door. First, the clergy, the choristers in white surplices, then the canons and the minor canons in all the splendor of their rich gold and stoles, behind the cross of gold of Westminster, glittering as it passes under the organ screen into the full light which is now flooding through the nave. And then a gap, and the bridal pair themselves coming out from the chapel of St. Edward, and as they pass, their Majesties the King and Queen, who are now standing to the right of the sanctuary, the bridegroom bows, and Princess Elizabeth drops a very deep curtsy. Now, the bridal pair move right down through the choir, past the diplomats, past, I see Mr. Churchill and Mr. Attlee standing close to each other and smiling across at bride and bridegroom under the organ screen, and Elizabeth takes Philip's arm as they come under the organ screen. The bridesmaids walking behind with the two little pages with dignity and pride in every step, taking extremely good care not to walk upon the almost diaphanous veil that's floating behind Princess Elizabeth in the full splendor of that lovely, translucent and glowing satin wedding dress. And still the organ peals forth, and we let the sound of the organ take them down to the great west door. Moment in the Abbey is now almost ended. The splendors and glories of the wedding service here are almost over. Bride and bridegroom, passing the tomb of the unknown warrior, have now reached the great west door, and the guests bow as the doors are flung open, and we catch a glimpse of the light outside, and a glimpse too of the welcome that's awaiting the new bridal pair as they step out from this glittering casket at the Abbey into the roar of the popular welcome outside. For a brief moment we see them, Philip now handling Princess Elizabeth, just offering her his hand, and we take you out from the Abbey now, outside to where the crowd of London is waiting to greet the new royal pair.
We are waiting, more breathless than we were, for the arrivals. The noise is surging up now. The anthem is played, and listen as the bride and bridegroom leave the Abbey. Carefully, she steps into the coach. Her long, lovely, shining white train is folded in behind her. The Duke of Edinburgh puts on his cap, standing waiting. All the crowds are on tiptoe now, with laughter and smiles on every face. The moment we've waited for so long as we heard the service going on. The bridegroom steps into the glass coach. Cheer after cheer rents the air up and down the great street as the captain's escort stands ready. The door of the coach is closed. The footmen take up their places at the rear. The outriders' horses that have been prancing and bucking, waiting for this moment, impatient, it seemed, for the royal couple to come out, are dancing now. The escort holds itself ready, the signal is given, and the journey back to Buckingham Palace past the cheering crowds of people begins as the coach leaves the west door of the Abbey and turns towards Parliament Square.
Parliament Square. Here comes the first, the lifeguards, the first of the procession. And any moment now, the glass coach will come out to this great crowd who are waiting on tiptoe for it. Here come the outriders in their red coats, and here are the Windsor Greys and the glass coach, and there they are. Oh, it's very exciting indeed. The crowds are getting their first glimpse of the bride and the bridegroom together, Elizabeth and Philip, our princess and her husband. What an exciting a day it must be for him. And what a day for the Royal Navy, too. The crowd there. And cheering tremendously as they come round this corner of Parliament Square, waving. The bridegroom's waving out of the window that I can see here, waving his arm with the 2 stripes of a lieutenant, the 2 gold stripes. For a young lieutenant in the Navy, what a day of responsibility this must have been. He's had plenty of experience of responsibility during his adventurous war service, and during the great Mediterranean Battle of Matapan, when he was in charge of the searchlights of a battleship, one of the great battles in this war where searchlights were used, and then later on as the first lieutenant of a destroyer in the landings of Sicily. And certainly this war record of his and his firm voice, which the crowd out here heard during the service over the loudspeakers, certainly these have endeared him tremendously to the hearts of this great crowd. It's a wonderful beginning. It's a great welcome to him from all these cheering, waving, affectionate people. And it's very, very moving. And now as the procession turns up Whitehall towards the cenotaph, towards the war memorial which commemorates the fallen in both the wars, Their Majesties the King and Queen are about to leave the Abbey, and we take you back to the west door to Richard Dimbleby to describe their departure.
It's almost as though the sun has suddenly come out on a grey day. This great splash of gold and scarlet, the warmth of people's laughter and their cheers, the great crashing of the Abbey bells, ringing and ringing and ringing, our memory of the sounds of the wedding march as it pealed out in the Abbey and came out through the loudspeakers here in the sanctuary outside. Now the carriage procession with the Irish state coach at its head is drawn up under the canopy. Gold, scarlet footmen, postilions and outriders, the sovereign's escort, the lifeguards, and their majesties come out onto the red carpet, the Queen looking lovely as she goes forward, smiling. The King salutes, and she steps into the coach. His Majesty follows. What a happy moment this must be for them both. The cheering is so great that even to my own ears, the national anthem being played by the Grenadier Guards over the road is very nearly swamped in the people's acclaim of their majesties. We've waited for 50 minutes while we listened to the service. It was a little cold after half an hour, but all that is forgotten in the warmth, the pageantry, and the heart-stirring moment that we see before us now. Other members of royalty come walking along the road to their coaches, over the sanded roadway. The King of Norway, the Queen of the Hellenes, they're saluting the crowds who are cheering them, the King and Queen of Denmark, and then the officers of the household, the little King of Iraq himself, standing, the little boy king, standing in his blue suit, opposite one of the royal coaches, looking at the horses, all alone in front of the crowd. I don't think for the moment they know who he is, and indeed, one of the policemen in front of the crowd has beckoned him to come back into the crowd, thinking that he's an ordinary child who's walked out into the road out of place. And the King of Iraq, obeying the beckoning hand of the London policeman, has moved to one side. I'm quite sure that policeman doesn't know what he did just then. And now as the cameras flash, the photographers take their pictures, and the bells in the background peal, we wait for the moment when the royal coach will leave us here at the Abbey. It moves forward now to the salute as the crowd roars with applause. The lifeguards' escort comes forward with the state trumpeter, and there goes their Majesty's journey home towards the palace. And it may be that even as we hear this cheering here, so others are hearing the cheering as the bride and groom pass by into the Mall. So, in order that you may hear them as well, let us leave this cheering and go back again to the Mall.
Yet another tremendous ovation was awaiting their Majesties, the King and Queen, returning together in the Irish state coach. Accompanied by her bridegroom, the princess appears in the full splendor of her superb wedding gown, glowing and flashing with its thickly encrusted patterns of pearl and crystal. Now the bridesmaids and the best man, the Marquis of Milford Haven, with the two small but very lively pages, Prince Michael of Kent and Prince William of Gloucester, who felt the excitement of the occasion to the full. Next to the bridegroom stands the chief bridesmaid, Princess Margaret. To the right of the bride is Princess Alexandra, daughter of the Duchess of Kent. The King, the Queen, and Queen Mary take their places in an historic royal group. Next to Queen Mary stands the bridegroom's mother, Princess Andrew of Greece. The royal visitors, welcome guests from many lands, had each a place of honor on this most memorable occasion. bounds, the crowd surged forward in a vast wave towards the very gates of the palace. Finally, on that famous balcony, the royal couple appear before a cheering multitude, breaking... A mighty demonstration of loyal affection on a day whose glories will long abide in every heart.